Hi, everyone. My name is Cynthia Carvajal. I am the University Director at the City University of New York Central Office. I oversee the undocumented and immigrant student programs. This presentation is titled, What's Next? Preparing and Supporting Immigrant Students. I'll talk a little bit about the ground rules in a bit. I do want to kind of note that we'll be providing all the spaces presented here will be providing as much information as we currently have available, resources, guidance, but as you know, there's still a lot that we don't know exactly what's going to happen. And I'm sure the presenters will talk at length about that. As we switch on presentations, I'll let folks introduce themselves, but we'll go ahead and get started with this presentation. So just a bit of notes on the agenda and what today is going to look like. As you can see, there's a ton of people here. So we're going to focus on concise information that will then provide more resources as we go along. First, it's an explainer on what is happening and what to expect from our partners at the CUNY School of Law. Then it'll be some information on preparedness planning. What can folks do to prepare for next week by our great partners at Unlocal. And then we'll also do a brief Know Your Rights refresher on from Citizenship Now. And then some student planning from the New York State Youth Leadership Council and staff and faculty planning from our office. I want to set a little bit of ground rules in the space, just considering the amount of people that are here and ways in which we can make sure that we're doing this efficiently. Firstly, this is being recorded. So please be mindful of that in whatever capacity you choose. Please do not unmute yourself. So as you can see, there's a lot of people in the workshop. And so we want to make sure that we're not talking over each other. So please do not unmute yourself. This means that you can add any questions to the Q&A. There should be a Q&A availability for folks to utilize. If you look at your bar of options and click on Q&A, you can add questions there, not in the chat. But if you are having any kind of difficulties accessing any of those things, you can put that in the chat, and part of our team here, Zaibel, Mujana, and Akanksha will help process that or help you navigate that. You can ask questions in the Q&A throughout, but folks won't be answering them in real time. They'll answer them after the presentation utilizing the Q&A. We will try to get to more questions at the end that maybe weren't answered. But please be mindful if folks aren't able to answer your questions. Lastly, as I noted, ask questions at the end. So we won't be taking any questions now or throughout. Please put them in the Q&A. Please do not ask about specific cases or circumstances. If you have questions about that, please make an appointment with any of the spaces here to inquire a little bit more about a specific case. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. The first folks who will be presenting is the CUNY School of Law on immigration updates.
Great. Hi, everyone. I really want to thank Dr. Carvajal and her office for putting this together. I think the immense RSVP numbers and those of you that are here show how needed this is. And I'm really, really happy to be here for this. First of what I hope is many conversations of talking through how we can better protect our students, our student body, and our CUNY community in this very difficult time. My name is Talia Pelig. I co-direct the Immigrant and Non-Citizen Rights Clinic at the CUNY Law School. And in that clinic, I, along with Professor Arestu, who you'll hear from in a moment, we, along with students, represent non-citizen, primarily New Yorkers in all stages of the immigration proceeding, and particularly focus on prioritizing, those related to the CUNY community, but also those who are particularly vulnerable and targeted due to involvement in the criminal legal system, being targeted for other religious or racial profiling in other particularly vulnerable communities. And that's the work we do. So turning to today's topic, I think before we kind of talk about what policies we expect to be coming, of course, we really need to talk about the first Trump administration, where we saw, and this is not new to anyone here, massive attacks on immigrants and the migration system. But I think something important to keep in mind when we talk about what to look out for is a lot of this was used through exploiting the current infrastructure and immigration laws that are in place. And certainly there were extreme new measures that created a lot of harm, and many, many people were hurt. There was also successful resistance, particularly mass organizing and mobilizing on local levels, that were successful in some instances. So I want to keep that in mind as we talk through what to look forward or what to expect is coming down the line. And I think that's really important as we think about what policies are to come soon, very, very soon. So we're going to also talk a little about different policies, but what has sort of happened, just to kind of fast forward very quickly, under the Biden administration, many of the draconian Trump policies on the immigration front were enshrined, furthered with very little resistance at that point. And now we find ourselves in this political moment where anti-immigrant and frankly xenophobic rhetoric are the norm across the political spectrum, and even more extremist positions are being pursued. The Trump administration now promises an even more violent version of the first agenda, and this time seemingly with the quote endorsement of the electorate. So what do we do here in New York City in the local community to try to resist? Trump has suggested through the Heritage Foundation playbook and others that he has relied upon to create policies that can at least give us a guide. As Dr. Carvajal said, we can't predict, but there are things we know to expect to help us be better prepared. And I'll turn over to Professor Arastu.
Hi, thank you, Professor Peleg. Again, my name is Nermeen Arastu. I co-direct the Immigration Clinic at CUNY Law with Professor Peleg, as she mentioned. And so kind of as we enter this conversation, Professor Peleg and I are very mindful of the very real impact a lot of what we're going to say, what you're going to hear about today has on many of our students, community members, colleagues. We're doing this to lay a foundation of what we think is the most significant and important things to look out for. And we also think through how we can best, as directly impacted or those who want to be allies, can fight back against some of these destructive policies. So we're hoping to do several things. One, we know information is power, right? We want to understand the reality and frameworks that are critical for legal workers and advocates and impacted people and communities who support them to be prepared. And then we want to just start thinking through effective strategies together. How are we together going to protect our communities, particularly in the CUNY systems, our clients, our students? There's going to be a call for bravery and courage also on the part of our institutions to stand up and defend our communities, which we think will be even more difficult this time around. So our knowledge and our organizing will be more important than ever. So Professor Peleg and I barely have a short period of time to go through a very vast immigration landscape. We're immigration law professors, but we're going to try to keep this accessible because we know you're not all law students. We hope you are one day. So we're going to divide it up into two ways. I'm going to speak first about the border, ports of entry, and vetting that we think that folks are going to face. And then I'm going to turn back over to Professor Peleg, who's going to really talk about that interior enforcement piece. So I'm going to start with the border, right? 3 points I'm going to start with. So starting with the border as the first of three. So really, why am I focusing on the border for this presentation in New York to CUNY students and community members? Well, a lot of what happens at the border, it's a testing ground for tactics, technology, and rhetoric to later being used to deport long-term immigrants in the interior. So we should all be paying attention to the border. And what we saw, as Professor Peleg started to highlight, as what was seen as outrageous border policy, like mind-numbing border policy under the Trump administration, has over the years largely been normalized under the Biden administration with a lot less outrage. So this concept of border externalization, this idea of where countries make it harder for people to reach borders in the first place, and we see that at our southern border, has really become the new norm through the establishment of digital borders. Now you need an app and an appointment, which is like a lottery with months of wait time to even get to the border and seek asylum. Otherwise, you're just automatically turned away. these things called third country agreements, where other countries like Guatemala, for example, are accepting, people are being sent back to that country who are seeking asylum in the US and being processed there instead, work with other governments to stop people from even approaching the US border. All are new normals. And so what does this really mean? In sum, the Trump administration on day one has said it's going to be harder to access asylum from the southern border, something that's already really down to a trickle even in this administration. These types of policy changes, like a lot of what Professor Peleg and I will speak about today, are the types of things that can actually be enacted immediately, executive policy. They don't even need to go through the legislative process. So what does that mean for the border? An immediate maybe termination of this CBP1 app program that I just described that's problematic in so many ways, but still is some pathway to seeking asylum, and a return to an even greater reliance on border externalization. So maybe a return to what was called the Remain in Mexico program, where, for example, individuals who were approaching the US border to seek asylum, an internationally deemed universal human right, and protected by our treaty obligations in this country, were not allowed to seek asylum, instead told to wait in Mexico and languish in what became some of the largest refugee camps in the world right at our southern border under the Trump administration, where individuals who were seeking asylum, again, a human right, were subject to really horrible, dangerous conditions, trafficking, poverty, crime, while waiting for their legal right to seek asylum in the US. So there's that piece at the border that I want you all to keep an eye on. And then there's this expansion of what we call expedited removal. And if you know a little about immigration, you already know you have very few rights in immigration. If you are even appearing before a court, it's an administrative court, you have no right to a lawyer. And kind of even a more black hole in terms of rights is this process called expedited removal, which allows for the sped up deportation, like an overnight summary deportation of certain non-citizens, without even access to that hearing before an immigration judge. This type of dangerous removal has historically only been used against those who had recently arrived to the US and who were picked up close to the US border. The last Trump administration really sought to expand expedited removal to apply to those anywhere in the United States who could not prove that they had been here for at least 2 years. There has been talk by the incoming administration that they would try this policy again. This was later pushed back when the Biden administration came in. The new Trump administration is saying they're going to use this policy again, perhaps to enable what they have called rapid mass deportation, which is exactly what this helps someone do, because you can kind of overnight deport people without access to counsel, without a chance to get counsel, without access to a judge. So again, it's very scary to talk about. What does this mean if you're worried about this listening on this call? So for the border piece, if you have friends and family who are looking to seek asylum, enter through the southern border and New York ports of entry even, really talk to an attorney to get the most up-to-date information about the possibility of seeking asylum at the southern border and how best to prepare for that crossing. And then if you, friends or family, have recently entered the US within the last 2 years and have concerns about expedited removal, again, you're going to hear a lot of us say this again and again tonight, is you really want to try to sit down with an immigration lawyer and learn right now about the best ways to kind of protect yourself, invoke your rights, have counsel on call, and I hope in a very unlikely event that any of us are facing that situation, but that's what you want to start thinking about. So moving quickly on to my second point, which is like ports of entry, and we remember travel bans. So during the first Trump administration, within the first 7 days after Trump took office, he began issuing the first of what were many travel bans, which banned individuals with immigrant and non-immigrant visas, and even some refugees from entering the United States. In some cases, this even applied to student visas, but later, much later, through a lot of litigation, student visas were like exempted through this process. But it's like unpredictable how these bans would go into effect again. And some universities have already issued travel advisories recommending foreign students and students on other types of immigrant and non-immigrant visas who are right now out of the United States to kind of try to travel back before Inauguration Day to avoid any potential sudden ban of this type. And so even, if you are arriving and you're not subject to such a ban, but you're on a student visa, you're not from one of those countries that was, in question last time, you can expect that there's going to be more increased vetting at the border, even for those who already have green cards. And especially vulnerable may be students who have engaged in certain types of organizing and activism on campus and beyond, which we know CUNY students, and we're a very active community, we're organizers. So you want to be kind of prepared there. And what does increased vetting at an airport mean? It means more questioning as you're coming through the airport, maybe more requests to provide documentation, a more detailed review of your social media, your electronics. So again, what does that mean if you're listening? If you and your friends, family are on student visas, listening in from abroad or on and outside of the country, if it's within your means to come back before inauguration, some are recommending that. But if you can't, really to connect with counsel again and develop a plan to protect your rights as you travel back into the country. There are a lot of available travel know your rights. And I know my co-panelist from Citizenship Now is going to do some of that advising with you today on this call when we turn it over to Sean. So just, really listen in, have that information ready, and really think about your electronic security. What do you want on your phone and computer as you travel back in through the border? Again, you want to talk to an attorney to talk you through all this stuff. And then the last point I want to hit before turning it back over to Professor Peleg is the heightened security on U.S. visa petitions by USCIS and consulates abroad. So the first Trump administration saw a greater vetting of petitions. So this meant higher standards, increased scrutiny, even on employment-based visa petitions like the H-1B, the L-1 petition filed by F-1 students. Many of you on this call are thinking about OPT, STEM OPT, resulting in more delays, requests for evidence, denials. There was an impact on family-based immigration. So maybe you're in that process or you have family members who are. We saw greater barriers to eligibility. Public charge and admissibility might ring a bell. This idea that there were greater, if you had, used certain types of benefits in the United States, you may not, public benefits, you may be barred from adjusting. There were more mandated interviews, heightened fiscal requirements on sponsors. And there was more scrutiny even on change of status petitions, adjustment petitions, that's that petition to get a green card, naturalization petitions. So again, what does that mean for those listening on this call? If you're in the midst of this process, maybe you're working without a lawyer and doing it on your own. Again, you want to make sure you are working with an attorney to carefully and thoroughly set up your applications for the most likely chance of success. And I'm going to turn it over to Professor Peleg for the interior enforcement piece.
Great. So we heard that the expansion of expedited removal is sort of one tactic of this increased mass deportation that Trump ran on, really, in this time around. The other ways that we're seeing that we anticipate he will try to increase deportation is sort of starting with rescinding status for those who have it. And obviously of great concern to our community here at CUNY, we are worried about the potential rescission of temporary protected status. This is a status that the government grants to, places to individuals from countries that are facing disasters, that are war-torn, and it really allows individuals to stay, live, work in the United States. Some people have been living here. I know this might be a refresher for some, but for decades under temporary protected status, like from El Salvador, from Honduras. There are people from Haiti who have temporary protected status. The first Trump administration tried to rescind this. And this is, again, an example where litigation, every single court that ultimately reviewed the issue did not allow the rescission to go forward. But there's been promises that that would be revoked. So again, taking away status from those who have it, making them suddenly now deportable, and in this kind of large class of people who could face deportation where they couldn't before. Similarly, we have many students under DACA, which essentially is a deferral from deportation. It's not technically a status, but obviously, known as dreamers, individuals who came here as young people and are, able to work, study, live here in the United States. Obviously, many DACA recipients are CUNY students. And there's been many efforts to stop DACA, including in the first administration to rescind it, and we anticipate that will probably happen again. So things to look out for. TPS was recently extended for several countries, El Salvador, Ukraine within the last week, several others. But it's just really important to know that, again, if you are in this situation or your loved ones, looking through, figuring out, are there any other potential options, any other avenues, any other pathways, I think would be prudent at this point. Professor Russ also mentioned sort of this increased effort to take away citizenship from those who naturalized, who became U.S. citizens within the United States. This existed before the Trump administration, but it was greatly expanded. So there's been promises to try to denaturalize individuals. It's not easy to denaturalize individuals, but if done, then they can suddenly face deportation again, despite being a U.S. citizen. So efforts to do that, I anticipate will happen. And there are good resources out there about this issue. And again, working with a lawyer closely is important in that situation. So I think, there might be potential changes to law to make deportation even easier than it is already, but I'm not going to kind of get into the nuance of that for time. The other big point that we've seen is this increased promise of immigration detention. Currently, there are 40,000 individuals in immigration jails throughout the country. These are jails. Many are in local jails. Some are privately run facilities that have very, very, very bad human rights track records, terrible conditions where immigrants are really held in jails facing deportation. And obviously, not only is that harmful to an individual, it also makes the likelihood of their ability to defend their case, to be near family, much more difficult. We have seen over the years an expansion of detention and expect that very much so now. What we see right now being debated in Congress, the Laken-Riley Act. If you've been following, it's already passed the House and the Senate is debating and considering expansion, is really looking to subject undocumented individuals who are just arrested for or charged with even a petty theft offense, being subject to mandatory detention. That means they cannot ask for bond, they cannot be released, and they're threatening to even expand this beyond that. I think the most important thing to think about there with this law being debated, putting pressure on, really, really important, your senators to not pass this legislation. It's extremely harmful. Even ICE itself and local prosecutors have said this will cause really great chaos, will kind of disturb the criminal legal system on the local level, but also create a lot of chaos and immigration detention. It gives also broad powers to states to intervene and sue in federal immigration policy, which is extremely problematic. So really important, if you haven't looked, there's petitions going around if you're interested, really important to fight back. But I think these kinds of efforts are going to continue. The other thing I think we're likely to see is greater reliance on federal local collaboration to facilitate the deportation of immigrants. There's certain programs like 287G that we think will be expanded that allow for local agents to act as federal agents. That's not in place in New York City, so I'm not going to really talk about that. But I think we're going to see nationwide this increased local cooperation, particularly in the criminal legal system, funneling people to the federal system. Something important I just want to say here, in New York City, there are a number of sanctuary provisions that limit the use of city property to help in immigration detention and enforcement and city resources. So there are some protections in place here in New York City, particularly if you're at a location getting human services such as social services, public benefits that are supposed to be protected from immigration enforcement. So we do have some important protections in place here that's important that we all know about as we go into the Know Your Rights portion. However, our current mayor has issued troubling statements about sort of the impacts of those laws and wanting to change certain parts of those laws, but they are in effect and they are protective, and it's really important to keep that in mind. Here, I just want to note, CUNY itself has issued a memo, the chancellor in 2018 on safety zones, which has been renewed and sort of reissued, which essentially tries to limit ICE's ability to enter our campuses and requires that they have a judicial warrant to enter non-public spaces on campus, and also has other protections regarding student information along the lines of a federal law called FERPA. So I'm just going to mention that that should be circulated, will be circulated if it hasn't been, and I hope we can work with Dr. Carvajal's office to do that. But there are some protections in place that are really important.
Thanks. And in the last minute that Professor Peleg and I have, we really wanted to highlight, I mean, it's like really obviously depressing and scary, even as we're preparing and we've been thinking about this to like write this all in a list. We wanted to highlight the amazing work that we saw done nationally and really locally from CUNY communities the last time around. So like, what are our options to push back? Well, there's public protests, advocacy, and direct action. You all were part of those, many of you, those airport protests, the direct action you engaged in on behalf of at-risk fellow students who were subject to removal, and faculty, advocating on behalf of faculty members and staff members and students who were subject to the bans the first time around. There was the grassroots organizing and advocacy for legislation. CUNY has been at the forefront of city and state policies that protect immigrant populations, accessing stabilizing benefits and resources. There's multiple chapters almost on every campus of active, undocumented, and people with DACA and other types of student groups who are doing this work. The legal challenges and litigation we saw come out of the law school where we work and beyond at the local, state, and national level, both on behalf of clients we were representing on direct, services level and on the impact litigation level, the amicus work. And many of you graduate students all across campuses were involved in documenting and publicizing abuses, telling these stories, sharing the stories. And we know storytelling and documenting the stories of impacted people is so important. The legal aid and direct services, again, offered by us at the law school, CUNY Citizenship Now, of course, their incredible work in providing services to community members, whether it's, and you all too as students, whether it's doing translation work, accompaniment work, legal work, other types of support. Campus centers participated in international advocacy and support, worked on sanctuary for immigrants who were at risk of removal, and worked on behalf of immigrants in detention. And lastly, as a community, we counteracted anti-immigrant rhetoric in the media. Those are just some things that the CUNY system did last time, and I know we will do again together.
Great. Thank you so much, Talia and Nermeen, sorry. I'm seeing folks are finding the Q&A. So again, please utilize the Q&A to ask any questions. Now that folks have added some questions, Nermeen and Talia will be typing in some answers. Any questions that they can't get to, we'll get to at the end. For folks, I know the chat is disabled, which is why maybe folks aren't asking how they can access the Q&A. But on your bar at the bottom of your screen should be 3 dots. When you click on that, or the Q&A option may already be on there, you just click on it. But there should be possibly 3 dots. Click on that. Click on Q&A as one of the drop-down options, and you should be able to access it there. We'll continue to kind of repeat that throughout, but I'm seeing folks adding to the Q&A, and I please continue adding questions there, and folks will answer them throughout. Okay. Next is some preparedness planning by folks at Unlocal. So Tanya is here. She will introduce herself and talk a little bit more about how to prepare for planning. And Tanya, feel free to let me know when to change the slide for you, or if you have your own presentation, happy to remove the screen and have you share.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Carvajal. My name is Tania Matos. I'm the Executive Director of Unlocal. We're going to stick with this slide for now, just as an introduction. And I have about 15 minutes to prep folks and present on this subject. I am formerly undocumented CUNY student, so I'm very, very excited to be here to present this preparedness plan. Next slide, please. Okay, so who is at risk of deportation? And thank you so much to the CUNY law professors who presented on who is at risk. But I will say not everyone has a right to do, not everybody, but most people have a right to due process, and not everyone is at high risk. I think part of the preparedness plan is to assess whether or not, or what your situation is at the moment, and if you are at high risk. So if an individual has an existing removal order, or you came on a visa from a country that participates in the U.S. plan of a visa waiver program, where perhaps you don't need a visa to enter the country, but there's an agreement between, for example, Argentina and the United States or other countries around the world. So those are folks that should get an immigration consultation as soon as possible to be able to assess and make a plan with a legal provider or an attorney for next steps. Also, who else is at risk is if anyone has any type of a kind of criminal accusation or a criminal history or arrest. Those are individuals who will likely, who we highly recommend to get a consultation as soon as possible to be able to assess what the situation is in your case. Next slide, please. Now, part of perhaps you don't fall in those categories, or even if you do, or unsure whether or not you fall into those categories, there are some resources that you can do immediately to take action on finding out what's happened in your case. So if you know perhaps that you've had an immigration case, or whether you don't know, or whether or not you've had an immigration case, because sometimes folks get mail and they never receive a notice to go into court, but you have an A number that perhaps you can you know of, and you have access to that. I'm going to add this link to the chat where you are able to insert your A number and check whether or not you've had a court hearing and whether or not a decision has been made on your court hearing. So I added that link to the chat. This is a link that many attorneys have, that many attorneys have access to. It is free, so you don't need to pay anybody to be able to access this website. So it's linked to you, and please share this information with folks. And let's say you have an immigration case, or your DACA, or any other work authorization card that you've applied for, and you don't know the status of it. Apologies. All the links that I add to the link that I added to the chat box will be emailed as soon as possible by CUNY. So I will share a link to a website, a public website again, where you can check the status of your case. And so those are two resources immediately that you can take action on right now to be able to find out more information about your case, whether or not you've had a deportation order or not. And so another step is gathering all of your immigration documents. If you have a work authorization card, if you have even a green card or any other kind of information from immigration, try to find all that information, keep it in one safe space so that you're able to access it as soon as possible. And a suggestion that we have is that if possible, go and scan all of these documents to your email. Things disappear, I've lost documents myself. It's just many documents sometimes of years worth of an immigration case that you need to carry with you. So it's I'm sure if you go to the CUNY system or the CUNY Center, you can scan up your documents so that it lives online in your own private email. So that way, if you need to forward it to somebody, an attorney or a family member, you have easy access to it instead of looking for it now. So that's another huge suggestion, is to gather all your immigration documents, even if they're expired. If you were to go to immigration or encounter ICE, please don't give them any false documentation, like a false passport or false social security number. That will go against you later on in a court of law. So like I mentioned, getting a consultation by an attorney. We have a link. I have a link on our website, unlocal.org, where you can access a referral list of private attorneys and also nonprofit legal services that by category of what they're currently doing right now and kinds of cases that they're taking on. So we can also link that resource later on. But it's highly important to get a consultation if you don't know what's next or where the current status of your immigration case is. Also, if you are at risk, if you do take medication or have any kind of medical needs, it's important to create a plan, list off of the kinds of medications that you take, and so that in the case anyone is to be detained, you have a list ready to go, and you know the list of medications that perhaps a family member can get to you or can communicate with ICE that you need. So it's just important to take care of the medical needs that you have now, in order to prevent anything from happening in the future and having to wait a long time for perhaps any kind of medical service or prescription. Next is preparing a family plan. These are always very difficult conversations to have with family members, roommates, chosen family, or even people that live in your apartment. But one, I'd start off with a family plan, is one, writing down all of the emergency contacts. And I do have a link to a piece of paper or a handout that you can use, where you can fill out and list off all of the emergency contacts. If you have certain individuals you want to contact, like if you want to let your partner know or someone know who is your attorney or who they should contact in case someone is you were to be detained. And so having that conversation with your family is, though difficult, is important. Just having a plan in place. So like I mentioned, is the medical needs and prescriptions, writing down all the conditions that you may have on this piece of paper. Also preparing your finances. You may or may not have access to your finances, but it's important to perhaps let somebody know or designate a very, very trusted person who may have access, who may you allow to have access to your finances, or at least know what banks you bank at. Whatever information you feel comfortable with, but it's important that someone knows where certain where you can pay your bills from, where you pay your bills from, and how to access certain accounts, so that if you need to pay your rent or you need to pay some kind of important bill, that they have access to that, and that leads to signing a power of attorney with someone who is trusted with your information. Again, this is a trusted person, perhaps your partner, perhaps a family member that you're close to, or a very, very close friend of yours. This is very delicate information, and I wouldn't recommend giving this information to anyone, but I do recommend finding somebody perhaps that is trusted to share this information with. One thing, if I can go back to preparedness as well, just being paying off any tickets. If you have an MTA ticket, for jumping the turnstile, or yeah, for mostly it's jumping a turnstile that I see a lot of people have. Please get that handled, or you get a ticket, a summons for some other kind of conduct, jaywalking or spitting, or anything of that sort. Please get that taken care of as soon as you can. And also is your social media stance, and when you Google your name, what do you find? It's very important for you to try to clean up your social media. I've seen people, post things like, flashing a lot of money, or maybe flashing other things that they're not supposed to, or doing things on social media and showing off certain things that they're, it's not looked good upon on immigration. So it's very important to make your accounts private, but also delete anything that is that you wouldn't want immigration to see. That's another way of getting prepared for having a preparedness plan is your social media stance. And so there is also, if people have young children, and this is, I'll talk a little bit about this because I think this would require a whole session around this, and a whole clinic, is around designation of guardian of a minor child, where if someone were to get detained and the child has to go to school and has to continue to live their lives forward with, perhaps the mother or the father being detained, you can designate a guardian for that child for the time being. And so there are, I believe, going to be or are currently existing workshops to help people fill out that form and go to family court. I think it's very important you work with somebody to try to fill out this form and go to court. There are some people that should not do this because if there's any involvement with ACS or other entities, for some people it's not suggested. But for some people, it is suggested if they'd like to designate someone who is trusted to be able to take care of the everyday child needs in the case someone is detained. And so, like I mentioned, we'll send a link to that to a document. But Unlocal is working. Is going to be working on perhaps working with other organizations to have workshops for individuals and parents who are interested in this process for their child. And then I know CUNY students are very active and are advocates for themselves. So I'm also going to send links to further trainings that are really important for you all to take besides this one. And that can go a little bit more in depth into being an advocate and training other people how to talk about these issues and family preparedness and all of that. So if just to answer some questions, if folks are from a mixed status family, obviously, like I mentioned, conversations are hard, but they're very necessary. In the past, what we've done is we've provided people with a piece of paper to put on their door, on their front door, if you have roommates, or live with other people in the apartment, or you live in a house with other individuals, and it just shows and it gives instructions on if ICE were to come to your door, what are the instructions that folks should do. But I think that's going to go into the Know Your Rights of what folks should do when they if they encounter ICE at their door. But that's part of the family preparedness, is just making a plan for, in the situation ICE were to come to the door. That's part of the plan. Like we mentioned as a recap, is like making sure there's a plan for your finances. There's a plan for any medical needs, and assessing your current immigration status and whether or not where you stand in the sphere of whether or not you're at higher risk of deportation or detainment and deportation. So we're here to support you in any way. And I'm happy to share. I'll share my email with Dr. Carvajal so that we can be a resource to you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Emphasizing just what Tanya said, links will be shared along with the recording and along with the PowerPoint presentation. So the links will be clickable. And then we'll also just share links that have been emphasized throughout. I'm going to move on to Citizenship Now for a brief overview on Know Your Rights. Sean, I think you mentioned you have your own presentation, so I can go ahead and stop screen sharing. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you. That's fine. Hello, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here. I am honored. I am Sean Rahman, a managing attorney at CUNY Citizenship Now. We are the largest university-based legal services or legal assistance program in the country. We currently operate out of a number of CUNY campuses, as well as out of approximately 37 to 40 city council offices in New York. So chances are we are close by to you if you're in the New York City area. Our contact information is provided on my background here for anyone who might need it. Now, thank you to Dr. Carvajal for putting this all together. I am going to go ahead and share my screen right now of Know Your Rights. 1 second, let me just expand this. Thank you. All right. All right, so the US Constitution, let me just start with this, grants rights to anyone in this country, regardless of their immigration status. Okay, so this does apply to everyone, but we just want to make sure that even folks without lawful immigration status understand that they have these rights that we're going to go over today. Okay, and there was a number of discussions today about who may be at risk, and I just like to just summarize some of it right here in this slide. It is folks with and without lawful immigration status. Those without lawful immigration status, an example, is people who overstay a visa, people who entered unlawfully or without inspection or without permission, for example, crossed through the border or arrived by boat, people who have been ordered deported. Previously, I think, as Professor Nastu mentioned before, people who have been ordered deported or final orders of protection, probably on the priority list, really, and certainly we're expecting those who have been previously ordered deported to be significantly at risk with the new administration. But it's also people with lawful immigration status, and those with green cards are not completely out of the woods. If you are a green card holder or anyone who's not a citizen and has had a criminal conviction, you certainly want to get yourself informed of whether that criminal conviction could potentially put you at risk to losing your green card. It happens. So if you are a lawful permanent resident and you've had an arrest, we recommend you speak to an attorney or a qualified legal services provider, particularly if that arrest was led to a jail sentence or was a somewhat serious crime. And really, you should only take the advice of an attorney. All right. Also, lawful immigration status is students, F1 students who worked off campus without authorization. This is an example of a lawful immigration status. If you violate your visa status by doing something like this, you could potentially be at risk as well. Okay. Who else may be at risk? we had mentioned earlier about the 2 year physical period of physical presence. Uh, After 2 years of physical presence in the United States, the law does grant you due process rights to have an individual hearing in immigration court before you are deported. And under the prior Trump administration, there was expedited removal was expanded to those who were even here but could for more than 2 years but could not prove it. So we think that that is certainly going to continue. Okay. Also include here parents who facilitate, bringing, bringing their children here into the United States, either directly or indirectly. And of course, if you are outside what we call the sanctuary cities, we have this issue of counties and cities significantly planning significant increases in their cooperation with ICE and the cooperation between ICE and local law enforcement to share information. Okay. All right. Tanya mentioned the border search exception, which is basically this idea that under our laws, a reasonable distance, which the courts have determined to be 100 miles, within 100 miles of the U.S. border, CBP is granted the authority to make warrantless stops of vehicles, of trains, of buses. And the amazing thing in this great page that the ACLU has on their website, here's a snapshot of it. Well, 200 million of us, 2/3 of the country, live within this border zone. Okay. And basically, the way it works is within this border zone, CBP can stop these vehicles and can, without a warrant, reasonably search anyone's search anyone. Now, what we need to understand is we still have rights against unlawful searches. Things like they are limited to what they can search. They need a judicial warrant in many cases, and we're going to take a look at that. So would love everybody to just look up and be aware of this 100-mile border zone before you travel. Okay. And since we live within 100 miles, in New York City, certainly that this applies to us. Okay. Much of this, the rest of this presentation has to do with ICE home raids and ICE arrests in public. Of course, this can be a very nerve-wracking thing. ICE want to go over some of your rights here. ICE home raids. ICE cannot enter your home without a warrant signed by a judge. Okay. Now, they can enter your home if any resident of that premises, so anybody inside, lets them in. So it's critical to understand your rights, that you do not want to give permission for ICE or for ICE to enter your home with permission. They need to show the judicial warrant, and we're gonna show a side-by-side comparison of what a judicial warrant is versus what ICE will try to sell as their warrant, an administrative warrant. So we're going to take a look at that in a minute. But also in public, not only at your home or not only at your residence or at your place of work, but also in public when you're walking down the street. If they have suspicion that somebody might be, undocumented or a priority for them, they can stop them. And you have those rights outside too. You have the right to ask if you're free to go, to remain silent, not to give the officer permission to search your belongings without one of these warrants. There was mentioned earlier that please, if you are at risk, do not give any false information. You are making things much worse for yourself if you give false information or false documents. We also recommend that you do not carry with you your foreign documents, your foreign passports. Okay, we certainly that will just give it away, and we don't want to make anything easier for them. So We strongly urge those who only have documents from their home country as far as ID not to carry those with them. Okay. All right. Our rights during any ICE interaction, whether it's at your residence or at home. Again, refuse entry into your home without unless ICE has a judicial warrant. Refuse the search of your home. Remain silent. You have the right to remain silent and to refuse to give any information about your status, and certainly do not sign anything. Many of you may have seen these cards. They're very often, this is what one of the cards looks like. Another popular card is that little red card. You might have seen them. Most legal service providers who are working in this space do have access to these cards. But if you just simply Google Know Your Rights red card, you will find stuff that you can print out, and you just have to give them the card, and they know what that means, that you are exercising your rights under the law. Okay. Just want to say that ICE will use any means to try to get you to cooperate. They will lie to you. Okay. They are trained to lie to you. Okay. ICE rarely has a judicial warrant because their burden of proof and the standard to get a judge to sign off on these things is really high. And lots of times they don't go through that process, or know they will never get a judge to sign it. So what they will do is they will lie to you. They will intimidate you to get consent. They will show you a warrant that's not valid and try to convince you that it is. So you need to be aware that this is happening. ICE officers are trained to do this. Okay. Again, don't open the door. If ICE shows up, you do not have to open the door. You can, and if they if you have a peephole, look through it. If they identify themselves as ICE, you can refuse to open the door. You can ask to see a judicial warrant. Okay, have them slip it under the door, or if you open the door, you tell them that they are not allowed in. Okay, unless they have this judicial warrant. And like I said, ICE officers typically do not have this warrant. I'm going to go ahead and show you the difference. Okay. This is judicial warrants is an example on the left. They don't all look like this, but they all will have the name of a court on it. Okay. They will show either the name of the person or the property that is the subject of the inspection, and they will be signed by a judge. Okay. So that in itself, those things are difficult to get compared to a Homeland Security warrant. Sample on the right. This is an ICE warrant where they just fill out themselves. Okay. And it looks all official, but it is not. It is not signed by a judge. No judge or magistrate is involved in issuing this warrant. Okay. So if you see this kind of warrant without a judge's signature, and it's issued by the Department of Homeland Security themselves, it is not a valid warrant, and you do not need to comply. Okay. Yes, if ICE has this valid warrant, look, if ICE had this warrant, they wouldn't ask permission. If they had the warrant on the left, they would not be asking permission. So I think that's probably the best thing to know here, that they wouldn't be asking permission if they had the one on the left, but they're asking permission, they probably don't have it. Okay. Again, if ICE is at your door, you can repeat these things. I do not want to talk to you. I'm not answering any questions. You do not have permission to come into my home. I don't want to speak to you. Please leave. Now, what does that do? That probably buys some time, okay, for you to make calls, get in touch with your attorney, engage your family plan at that point, okay, because they're probably going to come back, okay? All right. So one of the great handouts that various organizations have, I just want to show you this graphical thing that is that it does float around. Again, if ICE agents show up at your door, be calm. Okay, they're gonna try to raise the temperature. They're gonna be intimidating and yell. Be calm, because you need to think at this point. You need to remember this stuff about the warrants and the differences and exercise your rights. And you will do this so much better if you breathe and stay calm. Okay. Again, if you are arrested, please remain silent. Do not sign anything. You will get a chance to speak to your lawyer later. Okay. Let's expand this a little from ICE to other law enforcements like the NYPD. Okay. Now, yes, in New York City and the various sanctuary cities, there is that question about how much cooperation will the local law enforcement give, engage with ICE. Again, ICE officers, I just want to say about ICE officers, may lie about who they are. They will call themselves the police. As a matter of fact, they'll sometimes wear patches that say that they are police. They are not the police. Okay, they are ICE. Okay, so I will talk to you a little bit more about the NYPD in particular, and if you guys are around the country, it will also apply to local law enforcement. Okay. Just another reminder, if ICE has a judicial warrant or if ICE has gained entry into the home, then remain silent and don't sign anything. Okay. Once they're in the home, they are free to search the home. So, and if they see the person they want and they've gained access inside, they will likely arrest the person they want. Okay. Again, you have the right to remain silent. Just another slide here that says, that explains your rights. Even if ICE keeps asking you questions, just don't say anything. Just reiterate that you're remaining silent, or you don't have to say anything. Okay. Certainly don't answer questions and don't give out any information of where you were born or how you entered the United States. All of that stuff can make it a lot worse for you and incriminate you later. Okay. You have the right to speak to an attorney. Okay. You can say, I need to speak to my attorney. They may pressure you to tell you that you don't have the right to speak to an attorney, that you have to sign any document before you speak to an attorney. Assume that ICE will do anything to take away your rights and to get you just to sign something, and then you'll find yourself in proceedings or on a plane in expedited removal somewhere. Okay. Make sure you understand exactly what any document says before you sign it, after you speak to your attorney. Okay. If ICE gives you any papers and releases you, make sure you keep those papers safe and provide it to your attorney as soon as you possibly can. Okay. If ICE is arresting you, okay, let's say we're past that now and ICE is arresting you. Certainly, we said, do not lie. Do not interfere with the arrest. Do not interfere with the arrest. I cannot stress that enough. Let them get loud. You stay calm. If they're arresting you, just let it happen. Okay. All right. You should let them know if there's young children that, that need to be taken care of. That's the only thing you should tell them. Don't lie. Don't give them any false information. Don't give them any foreign documents. It's okay. In New York City, we have this municipal ID card. We strongly urge those who might be at risk, if you do not have any other New York ID, go ahead and please look up the New York City ID card. It's very important that you do. Okay. All right. Always carry copies of any valid immigration documents. If you are a green card holder, please carry a copy with you. Okay. If you have a valid visa, please carry a copy with you. And if you do not have valid immigration agreements, certainly, again, do not carry documents from another country. Okay. A list of documents not to show ICE. Don't show them foreign passports, a consular ID, any kind of foreign documents. No fake documents, no expired visas, certainly not documents that belong to someone else. If you use somebody else's documents, you could be in a lot of trouble if they catch you with them. Okay. We talked about the emergency family plan. Just want to just quickly go over this again. Keep important documents in a safe place with friends. Make photocopies of them in case you are detained or picked up by ICE. They will have them. Okay. Start collecting those documents if you right now. If you've been in the U.S. for at least 2 years, you may find yourself in a position to having to prove that. So your bills, your credit card bills, your banking statements, your school records, taxes, birth certificates of kids born in the United States, those can help you later. So collect those documents, photocopy them, give them to friends and family members who don't live with you. Okay. Memorize the numbers of friends and family members so you can call them later. Do not rely on your phone. They will take away your phone. Okay. So a number of other things here. There's planning resources for parents that we have on our CUNY website that gives guardianship, a temporary guardianship to kids who are left behind. A scary thought, but could be reality soon. Okay. There was made mention a number of times about standby guardian in the event of an administrative separation. NILAG has a great form. There are different versions of this forms, but NILAG has a great one. We're going to go ahead and provide this link to everybody in the resources. This is basically a non-judicial agreement. It's between the parent and somebody else that the parent agrees to appoint this other person as the temporary or temporary caretaker in case the parent is deported, okay, or detained, okay. Those who may be at risk, their families should know how to find them in case they are picked up by ICE. There's an ICE detention locator to find adults in ICE custody. If that doesn't work, and you should first contact your local field office, but this detention locator is very important for family members and friends to have. Okay. You should also give your family members or friends the phone number of the local ICE enforcement and removal office. Okay. Finally, my last slide for today. If you are stopped by police in particularly New York City, and to an extent also depending on the laws of the other cities around the country, police can stop you and briefly detain you only if they have reasonable suspicion that you committed or about to commit a crime. Okay. They cannot just stop you without cause like that, without reasonable suspicion. You should ask if you are under arrest or are free to leave. And say, officer, am I free to leave? Okay. You have the same right not to speak. Okay. To exercise this right, and we've all seen this on TV, but I want to show you, you can just say, I have the right to remain silent. And, part of those Miranda rights, that we all see, they tell you have the right to remain silent, but even before they tell you, you can tell them that you would like to remain silent, okay? You never have to consent to a search of yourself or your belongings without a warrant, okay? If the police say they have a search warrant, ask for it. But if they don't, just say, I don't consent to the search. Police cannot arrest you or ticket you just for refusing a search. In New York City, and I just want to say this is in New York City, other cities and states might be different, you are not required to carry ID, and you don't have to show your ID to a police officer. Now, if you're issued a summons, okay, or arrested, okay, they can detain you if you refuse to show them ID to long enough to determine who you are with certainty. So, just should understand those rules. Cop comes at you in New York City and says, do you have any ID? You do not have to show it to them. Okay. So those are the rules for New York City police. Okay. I hope this was helpful. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Dr. Carvajal and go ahead and I think looking forward to answering some of these questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
You're muted.
Yes. Thank you for the presentation and a refresher on Know Your Rights. Seeing folks may have access to annotate, please refrain from writing on the screens as folks are sharing their presentations. Sean and Monique have been answering some questions in the chat, and so are the rest of our presenters, Tanya, Nermeen, and Talia, and continuing to answer questions in the Q&A. So please continue putting them, and then any that we don't answer via written, we'll try to get to at the very end. Again, want to emphasize, no questions on particular individual cases. So please don't share any sensitive information about your case in the Q&A. For those, you can reach out to the spaces that are here for a individual consultation. And like it's being said throughout, presentations and recording and links will be shared, as well as contact information via email to everyone who's here and is registered for this workshop. Now I'm going to hand it off to Maria Vera from the New York State Youth Leadership Council. I'll let her introduce herself, and she has a set of slides to prepare and present as well.
Yes, hi everyone, thank you. I'm gonna share my screen. Give me a second. Sorry, I think it's lagging. Okay. You should be able to see it now. So hi everyone, my name is Maria, pronoun she, hers. I am from the New York State Youth Leadership Council. I'm the community organizer. And I just wanted to do a temperature check. I know we can utilize the chat as we usually do, but maybe do like a mental check-in with yourself. I know we've been talking about a lot of information. So I know it's very overwhelming, and I think I'll just share. I'm feeling very much like 4, 5, 6, maybe a little bit of 3. If you haven't heard about the WASI before, the WASI, for short, is the first undocumented youth-led organization in New York. And we work to empower immigrant youth through leadership development, grassroots organizing, education advancement, and self-expression. And our goal is to provide safe spaces for undocumented and immigrant youth to be able to organize and create change. And tonight, I wanted to speak up specifically about our Dream Team Network, which are a group of undocumented youth and supporters who fight for immigrant rights and create better schools for immigrant students at CUNY and at public schools, mostly in high schools at the moment. And there's like a couple of middle school Dream Teams as well. Just going to my next slide. We believe that our Dream Teams which are student-led clubs, are vital to the movement, but as well as for the safekeeping of immigrant citizens in schools. The first Dream Team was created in 2010 at Lehman College, and that original Dream Team was pushing for the passing of the New York State Dream Act, which was drafted by undocumented youth here at the New York State Youth Leadership Council. And then the first high school Dream Team was at Flushing International High School in 2011, and that is still one of the most active high school Dream Teams to date. And together we have worked building campaigns, organizing conferences, and raising funds for scholarships, amongst many other things. We provide safe spaces in their schools. They provide, recently a lot of the college Dream Teams and the high school Dream Teams have been doing Know Your Rights sessions in their schools, during community hour at the campuses, open nights and parent nights at the high schools. And you can scan the QR codes if you want to learn more about the network and if you're interested in becoming a member. This is only for students, and it doesn't matter if you don't have a dream team at your school or campus, you can still be a part of it. We are starting our bi-weekly leadership trainings at the beginning of February, once the semester kicks off. And from there, we'll have bi-weekly or monthly trainings, depending on the need. We often have paid opportunity regardless of immigration status, and we provide one-on-one support for the students or dream teams. And most importantly, a lot of the students create friendships and find community. I was an incoming freshman the last time that what's his face? I don't want to say his name, was elected. And I was also the president of the BMCC Dream Team at the time. So at the time, I was very much new to the movement work. I was new at YLC. I was just a member at the time, but I was leading the Dream Team, and I felt like a call to create and foster a safe community for students. So some of the things that we did were Know Your Rights trainings. I spoke with the president at BMCC, and we were able to get a memo from the president expressing their support for immigrant and undocumented students, DACA recipients at the time, because like DACA was under like a huge threat. Still is, but at the time it was when it was very brand new. And we were able to rally, do marches, and create a list of mutual aid resources on the campus. And I think that is a lot of the work that continues to be done in a lot of the other dream teams, but most importantly, right now it's kind of like coming back again. And if you're interested in finding that kind of space, we have an interest meeting February 13th at 6 p.m. You can scan the QR code again or go to the website. And then if you scroll down, you should be able to see the interest form. I know there are educators here in the space. We have also a team for educators called Teach Dream. And if you also go on our programs website, on our program section of the website, you should be able to see more about Teach Dream and the sign up form for that space if you're interested in creating that kind of network. And then I'm just sharing a couple of the most active dream teams currently in CUNY, which are CCNY at City College, Hunter College, Baruch, Brooklyn College, John Jay Dreamers, Goodman Community College. And even if there isn't an active dream team at your campus, you can still be a part of the network. There are members from BMCC and a couple of other colleges, Queens College, that they don't have an active dream team, but there is like a space where they can organize, and there were dream teams in the past. So don't hesitate to show up if you need that space, especially because a lot of the meetings and the conversations that we have are around creating safer spaces at CUNY, right? Like I know some of you have been asking about the things that are happening on campus, like departments, career offices, continuously inviting ICE and CBP to campus to recruit, and that creates a safe and harmful environment for immigrant and undocumented students. So a lot of the dream teams and a lot of the students are rallying and pushing for that at their individual campuses to stop that or to create safer spaces, better funding for the current centers that are at CCNY, Brooklyn, John Jay, and things that function properly, because providing like DACA renewal funding is not always enough, because a lot of the students now do not have DACA either way. So a lot of the needs that we see and are really important come from the ask of the dream teams. We also have at the YLC the organizing team and the advocacy team. I know at the beginning, some folks were sharing from the CUNY Law School about the actions that were taking place in like 2016, 2017, and throughout the last term that he was in the White House. And that was when I was also politicized, and I was attending those marches that they were speaking about at like Battery Park and like the airport ones. And It was very scary to do it because I was like 17, I think, at the time, or 18. But I felt like I was in a safe space with other Dream Team members, with WASI folks, and people who had been in the movement for a long time. And this year, we're also attending the actions that are happening on the 20th. We will be at, I believe, Washington Square Park. And you can text that number if you're interested in joining our safe like group to attend that march on Monday. And then on Tuesday, we're gonna have a game night at 6 p.m. And you have to sign up to be able to access the building. So if you want to attend that, it's very low stakes. Like if you're just trying to like dip your toes and find out who we are, if you've never heard about us, or if you're just trying to find like a space where you can like spiral and feel all the things that you need to feel, or just see other folks who are going through the same things as you can come to our game night. It's open to anyone interested in or that cares about immigrant people. That's where you can find the links. They're already here. And yes, so I'm just wrapping up now. Very important dates. The rally is January 20th. The game night is January 21st. And then the interest meeting for is February 13th for the Dream Team Network. And if you scan that QR code, all my contact information will come up for you, my email, phone number, our website, on our social media. But you can also reach out to Dream Teams at nysylc.org. That's the Dream Teams email. My email is maria@nysylc.org. Or if you have any general questions about anything else, you can just email the info email. And that would be all for me. I know there's a couple of questions coming in the question section, so I'll jump on that to answer.
Great. Thank you so much, Maria, for all this information. So as folks are seeing, we're winding down. At the start of the presentation, we were really focusing in on what are some of the things that have been said, how can folks prepare, how can they know their rights? And now Maria introduced some information that can feel relevant and supportive for undocumented students. I know educators often have the question of, where do I refer my students to? How can I give them all the resources that they're asking for? And it's not possible to know all this information all the time. But it's important then to connect them with community spaces that are already leading and doing this work. So what I'm going to cover now, and I've seen it asked in the Q&A portion, is information on how are campuses maybe implicated, impacted by some of the things that folks have been talking about? What are some of the resources that are already in place at some of the campuses? And what is in effect as it relates to protections, sensitive locations? I know some of those questions have also been asked in the Q&A. I'll leave it to the lawyers to answer the specifics about that, but I will talk a bit more in detail about what is happening at CUNY. And so I think folks should be able to see my screen. So this is the portion on educator planning. So as I said, my name is Cintia Carvajal. I work at CUNY Central in supporting undocumented and immigrant students. First, I want to kind of list out what are some of the protections that are currently in place at the campuses. This is not specifically for undocumented students, this is for everyone. So FERPA is still a protection in a federal regulation that is in place at all campuses. This protects student data, and so it cannot be accessed without a judicial warrant or, judicial subpoena or a valid warrant. Sean already went into the details of what those exactly look like. And maybe you're not a front-facing person or a public safety person that would interact with these kinds of documents or these types of requests. But it's important to know that FERPA is in place for everybody as it relates to data protections. And I'll talk a little bit more about what is exactly happening at the campuses as it relates to these trainings and regulations. Another resource that I wanted to share is the President's Alliance for Immigration, for Higher Education and Immigration is an excellent hub for a ton of different resources specifically for all immigrant students, so undocumented, international students. I know some of those questions came up in the chat as well. They have a form on data protections for FAFSA information. And so it talks a little bit more about what exactly it looks like for FAFSA, as well as the document you see on the right. That's specifically about safeguarding undocumented student data in higher education. So I really recommend getting familiar with their documents, with their website. I'll talk a little bit more about what are some key resources in their pages that can help inform some of the questions that you have and some of the things that maybe campuses should start considering if they haven't already. And again, these are all, so this is like a link. These are links that will be accessible. For folks that are joining us, please remember to put your questions in the Q&A. We won't be taking questions from folks that are participating outside of the Q&A. Okay. And so as campus spaces, as educators, as faculty, staff, what are some initial steps that you can begin taking to support your undocumented students? So I have some suggestions listed here. Firstly, it's assess what vulnerabilities exist at your institution. Secondly, educate on major points. Thirdly, develop guidance and protocol, or request them to develop guidance and protocol, and emphasize an accountability network. I'm going to go into detail for each of these. So firstly, assess vulnerabilities. It's if you're a faculty, staff, educator in your educational institutions, you might want to know what type of data does your campus currently collect, if any. So are they collecting country of birth? Are they collecting immigration status? Do they have any codes or indicators that could highlight that this is an individual who may be undocumented? So it might be important to ask these questions from your supervisor for them to elevate to campus leadership to figure out what is exactly happening. So do staff know that they shouldn't be stating their students' immigration status over email or any kind of written correspondence? These are kind of important questions that need to be asked. Whether this is happening at CUNY, it depends on the campus. However, these conversations are happening at the central level. So when it comes to kind of anything that's being centralized, I'm asking these questions and trying to get some answers about them. But the individual campuses may collect additional data. And so it's important to ask these questions, not just to the admissions office and the financial aid office, but also if you have an internship program, if you have some stipend opportunities that may be asking some of these questions from your students. So secondly is to provide educational opportunities for your campus on some major points. So one is state sovereignty is still an amendment in the Constitution. And what I mean by that is that in-state tuition and state aid are still intact no matter who is president at the federal level, because states have jurisdiction over how they disseminate their funds and their resources. And so in-state tuition and state aid in the state of New York is still here. And actually, I'll talk a little bit about new legislation that was just introduced that would address some of this as well. City policy can also be leveraged to protect immigrant students. So what does protections against ICE and private property look like at the local and state level? There's a lot of misconceptions and anti-immigrant rhetoric that convince staff that a new president also determines the state law. The National Review has an excellent resource that really breaks down what are those misconceptions. And so this is an opportunity to educate your campus. And so some examples, campuses have hosted Know Your Rights workshops and talking circles. I know John Jay has Hunter is hosting some legal clinics as well. Government Community College has hosted immigrant conversations. So if this isn't happening at your campus, this might be the space to be activated and to ask supervisors, colleagues, supports to figure out how you all can host this at your spaces. And as you can see from the folks who are here, there are individuals who can help provide that information or lead you in the right direction. And so there were a lot of questions on guidance and protocol development. What I list here is to inquire about drafting or sharing guidance or protocol. I know some of it needs to come from a centralized space. In presenting to the presidents, the vice presidents, and academic council, so deans and provosts, there isn't any current guidance that's being provided at the centralized level. However, we're finding that by inquiring and asking and like showing concern about the fact that there may or may not be guidance can also help us motivate folks to help issue that guidance at the individual campuses. So again, this is a space to be activated, to ask these questions, and then as I'm showing here, to provide examples of how other campuses have already issued this type of guidance. All of these are public, so like they're all on their websites. Again, the links will be clickable, so you'll be able to access them. But I do want to note that there is some hesitancy about putting this type of information publicly. It can depend on your campus and how folks in the leadership space choose or not choose to post this publicly on a website or guidance. But at the very least, internally and through front-facing, public-facing staff, it's important to provide this information. And actually, before I go into the network of accountability, so I think I want to emphasize that the guidance protocol, as it relates to ICE coming on campus, as it relates to federal agents coming on campus, at this moment is really being developed individually by the campuses. So for example, Hunter College has a protocol in which they've trained their public safety team on how to go step by step, responding to an inquiry for data with a judicial subpoena or a warrant. John Jay also has this process, and they partner with the center to then update students and make sure that everyone is aware that ICE may or may not, or like is on campus, is not on campus, so that students aren't taken aback or surprised as to why they may be present. Just to note, in those instances, it wasn't for a judicial warrant. It was for recruiting at a career services or a career center event. And I know I'm throwing a lot of tasks on you, right? So I'm saying, go ask your leadership, where's the guidance? Provide some educational opportunities on know your rights. But I think I want to emphasize that to tap into a network of accountability. So like it says here, you can't do this alone at your individual spaces. There really needs to be other people involved and updated in the process. So engaging key departments. So admissions and financial aid are spaces that are already engaging with undocumented students at a clear and significant level, either through the New York State DREAM Act or through the admissions process. So this may be a space that's already understands the gravity of this and can be a good partner for it. Vice presidents and provosts can help lead and push these efforts. As I said, I already presented to the vice presidents and the provosts this week. And so they are very much aware, and this is on their radar. So having staff and folks that report to them or connect with them also emphasize that this is important. What are we going to do next? We'll continue to motivate them to provide guidance, to provide support, to even support you all and the network that you may be developing. And like Maria was saying, excuse me, campus dream teams need to be involved in this process. And so if you don't have a campus dream team, I'll explain a little bit more about how to get connected with students through the DREAM US and Immigrant liaisons, but I think engaging student leadership. So Maria talked a lot about the organizing efforts that students have done. Oftentimes students are, just as faculty are able to say certain things that maybe staff aren't able to do, students are also able to mobilize in different ways than staff and faculty. And so it's good to form a connection through all of these spaces. Another thing to emphasize is when you're reaching out to these spaces, it's important to make a clear ask, right? So we've provided some examples. Maybe some ideas have sparked from hearing folks, whether it's ICE on campus, whether it's data protections, whether it's like Dream Team or funding for different opportunities. These are clear asks to make so that leadership knows how to move forward. And I kind of mentioned this already, but connecting with faculty and other spaces at the intersection of this work. So in the rights of immigrant folks isn't just siloed with immigration status, race, gender, sexuality. Those are all things that intersect with this experience, religion, disability. So it's important to also connect with those spaces because they're as equally invested in supporting this population. And if you're at a CUNY campus, a network that already exists, if you're not a liaison yourself in this call, is Immigrant liaisons and DREAM US liaisons. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but these are individuals that are directly connected to students and meet with me regularly. And so the immigrant liaisons, the Dream US liaisons also are connected with the Dream US scholars. So this is how to engage with the student population at an initial level. Okay, another thing to emphasize, just to kind of highlight that you're not expected to do all this on your own, is you're also not expected to just like magically know all this information and all these resources on your own. But it's important to stay connected and stay up to date. So I shared in one of the Q&As all of our Instagram handles. Following relevant spaces on social media can help you be connected, because often spaces are sharing different types of information on their social media, on their stories. And so we'll be, it's in the Q&A, but it'll also be in the email that I sent out. The space that I've been kind of emphasizing as well is the President's Alliance on Higher Education and Immigration. They have a higher education portal that breaks down what legislation exists across the country. They have FAFSA and Data Protections Hub. So the 2 documents that I referenced, plus more, including webinars. Rights and Protections Hub that you'll see listed here, talking about all the information that Sean referenced as it relates to know your rights. And they also have a mailing list. So if you're like, the website can be a little overwhelming, but super informative. But if you want all of that condensed in a really succinct email, you can join their mailing list and get more up-to-date information. And they're also an incredible wealth of knowledge. So you can also reach out to them for more questions. Maybe another point of activation is I believe them, maybe not all of them, but a lot of CUNY presidents are part of the President's Alliance. But if your president is not, or maybe you don't know if they are, it might be important to inquire, because this is a space that's constantly connecting with the presidents to provide them with information and resources. And so what I also want to do is uplift ongoing efforts. I was at a convening this past weekend, and it was super stressful because everyone was talking about what may be happening. But one of the things that kind of felt a bit grounding was that folks were also sharing the successes. So I think Maria talked about that as well, the success in getting the New York State DREAM Act changed really the opportunities for students in the state of New York in a really drastic and positive way. And so I want to talk about some recent efforts in New York, because I know there hasn't been a lot of positive news for the state of New York. So the New York State Empire State Licensing Act was recently reintroduced. This would remove citizenship and immigration requirements from professional licenses in the state of New York. So you may not know, but only access to a law certification, so the bar exam, is available for individuals who are undocumented, no other professional license, or full professional license, I should say. So this legislation would remove that requirement and expand eligibility more. Another legislation that was introduced is a bill that would expand requirements for in-state tuition for undocumented DACA refugee and asylum seekers. So this is something else that could allow more students to access in-state tuition in the state of New York. So I know a question was asked about whether the state can remove the New York State DREAM Act. The state has control over their state legislation, so they essentially can do what they want, just as the federal government can as well. But as you can see here, there's efforts to expand access to resources. So it really means for folks who are US citizens and are able to vote, it really means making sure that these types of efforts are being supported by you, by other constituents, and communicating that the way that you feel is necessary. And so some resources, very briefly, and I changed the color to kind of wake folks up, some resources that are available for at CUNY as it relates to undocumented and immigrant students. Firstly are the Immigrant Student Success Centers. So you'll see here John Jay, Brooklyn College, City College, and a new addition is Hunter College as well. So all of these spaces have full-time staff with regular programming, one-on-one support. So if you're in one of these campuses and you haven't connected to the center, please do so. They have a ton of resources and are good partners in this work. There are also initiatives at the campuses. So Baruch, Gutman Community College, Queens College, although these are not full-time staff members, they are doing incredible work at the campuses. This is another space to connect with. And just as Maria said, maybe also a space to support in accessing more funds so that they can meet the centers where they're at in providing full-time support and resources. And then lastly, I kept referencing the immigrant liaisons. Every campus has at least 2 immigrant liaisons. So if you're on this workshop and you're not an immigrant liaison, it would be important for you to connect with these individuals. As I said, they are the ones who are providing undocumented trainings, they're connecting with me, they're receiving information, they're actively engaging with students. This is the first person to connect with to build resources together. And so I want to emphasize that it's not about kind of telling this person, okay, you do the work. How do we all build resources together? Because this is going to take a community and we can't do this alone. So that's the end of my presentation. What I want to do is stop the screen share. And I know folks have been answering questions throughout. I'm going to ask the presenters to show their, what is it, like put their camera on? I don't know how to say that. But I'm gonna provide an opportunity for folks to answer questions that maybe were too complicated to type out. If none come to mind, then I can name a couple if that works for folks. Is there any like particular question that folks really wanted to answer?
Cynthia, I do want to answer one question that kind of like hit me because when I went to, I'm a graduate of CUNY and I saw counselors all the time. Although I was a citizen, that question, somebody asked a question about whether conversations with the counselor are protected by confidentiality. And I believe they are, but they're not protected from the government if they have a judicial warrant. So I think counselors are ethically obligated in our school systems in New York to keep that stuff confidential. So I think students can talk to the counselors freely, but understand that if a counselor is presented with a judicial warrant, they probably have to disclose that information. Okay. One more thing I want to answer quickly. Somebody asked a question of whether those who have applied for asylum already, are they protected from deportation and being detained? And certainly we hope they are, but the way this proposed borders are, and the guy is so offensive to me, I can't even say his name, but I will. His name is Tom Homan. He's talking about mass detention in tent cities, including those who are awaiting adjudication of their asylum. So, I hope that those who have applied for asylum can show that they are that they have applied for asylum, that they have some proof on them, maybe their work authorization or something else, and this will not lead to detention. But again, I think it's a scary time ahead for anyone who is in that position. So, all right, I'm sorry. Those are the two that I think I felt the most. I want to hand it over.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. One question that I see in the Q&A for our legal folks to answer, or our lawyer folks to answer, is what should you do or advise students to do if your claims to constitutional rights are not heeded?
So I'll try to answer. I imagine this is like related to sort of all the material that Sean was covering around, like if you say you don't want to speak to them, and if you say you can't enter the home and they do enter the home, or other, things like that. I think, I absolutely, everything Sean said, I 100% echo and agree. I think it's also really important after those interactions to record kind of what happened. I agree not to interfere with the arrest, not to, put yourself in harm's way. But something that actually really came up a lot during the first Trump administration was there were tools that were created by the ACLU and others where you could record certain interactions. And again, you have to assess your own safety if you feel comfortable. And I'm curious what others think here, if you were willing to do that. But a lot of people I know and clients I've worked with after an interaction perhaps wrote down what they remember. So there were questions here about, can I get an ICE officer's badge number or not? Like writing down as much detail as you can, Because as Sean said, absolutely, they use very aggressive tactics, may in fact, and if they do come into the home, they may be able to arrest you, but there are some limits, not as many as in the other contexts. Um, but it's really important to document what is happening if you witness an arrest to the extent that ICE may operate more freely on the streets, as we saw with CBP that was, on our streets during the protests and during a lot of the Black Lives Matter movement mobilization. So I just want to say, I think it's really important to record what is happening, both narratively, it's extremely important, but also can really help with someone's case. So to the extent that you witness an arrest or you're in a household where something happens, as traumatic as it is, as difficult as it is, from a legal perspective, I do think after the fact, when you're safe and feel able to, I think writing that down and exactly what happened is helpful. I've actually used that in cases of mine where I've actually been able to kind of make out that something egregious happened that was so egregious that we were able to get sort of the case closed against my client. So just something it's very, very difficult. There's not much that can be done, but that can be powerful and perhaps lead to a remedy in a specific case. And I also think publicizing, like to the extent people are comfortable, what's happening, where rights are being violated is extremely important in using those tools.
Thank you, Talia. Another question that came up in the chat that may apply to anyone here is there kind of a not a centralized, but an existing rapid response to know kind of where ICE may be in the community?
I can try to answer this. We've seen some efforts to try to establish certain apps. For example, I've heard of the Mexican government is going to launch an app soon that it's called the panic button, but I don't think it's officially launched yet. But actually, what I would, rely more so on are mutual aid groups. I know mutual aid groups across the 5 boroughs are organizing, and there are people that are training mutual aid groups on how to do ICE Watch, or if an ICE were to show up to somebody's house in somebody's neighborhood, it's important that you communicate to other people or community members or at school so that the word can get out there. And one, we can verify through video, through yourself, through video, or someone can go there that lives around where you live to verify whether it's ICE or not. There were a lot of false alarms of some people thinking that it was ICE, but it was not. And so I think Maria also shared some at NYC ICE Watch is doing trainings for folks that want to get involved on a citywide level. I'll let others answer.
Yeah, there's a number of things in the works, I think. Also, I do recall that the IDP, the Immigrant Defense Project, put out what's a real-time website. I think if you call ICE Watch, if you Google ICE Watch IDP, you should be able to find it. And it's a live map of what's going on, people are reporting. But as Tanya mentioned, the risk to that is a lot of false alarms, So, okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, so I shared the Instagram handle for the New York City ICE Watch. They have trainings coming up this weekend throughout the city. And as well, our advocacy team is hoping to build a network throughout the city as well, made up of students and allies. So if you're also interested in trying to do that, you can reach out to me in the links that I sent so that we can connect.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, it's like somewhat related to this. I do think like something else that was really, really important during the last administration was, you know, people who felt relatively safe and who wanted to be allies for those who are most vulnerable often were the first to show up or to try to show up to try to sort of stand outside a home so that an arrest wasn't made. And that was really, really impactful. So to the extent, I know it's a very different time, but to the extent, and obviously we really appreciate how many of you are here and still here. I think there's a role to play for those of us who have the privilege of status and citizenship to, really be, to the extent that it's asked of us to be able to, you know, respond to some of these calls. There was also, Professor Restu mentioned this idea of accompaniment that was super, super important for a lot of clients. I had community members come to check-ins with ICE and other things, and coming to immigration court, watching proceedings, putting pressure. I can't emphasize enough how important that is for and how much that impacts these decisions. A lot of decisions in this area are extremely discretionary, despite what they might say. Things might be mandatory, things might be a certain way, but you'll see all the time things are not playing out the same in different cases. So putting public pressure on is extremely, extremely important. And it's somewhat tangentially related, but I do think there's a really important role to play, whether you're an attorney, a student, community member of faculty, whatever your role is coming into this, there's a lot that can be done.
Thank you, Talia. I know we've gone almost to 2 hours, so I want to be respectful of the time and effort that you all have put in this. So thank you so much. We're gonna close it out. I did see some additional Q&A questions, but many of them were specifically about kind of individual cases, maybe involves tax law as well. So like I said, we'll be sharing contact information via email. For additional questions or follow-up, and all the links that have been shared throughout. So thank you everyone for being here.